All right, everyone. Vermont is on the precipice here, about to pass a significant number of draconian anti-Second Amendment laws, which is, what it boils down to. I should ask my fellow Vermonters rhetorically an important question before I even bother talking about what it's actually considering to ban or whatever. When's the last time that there was a mass shooting in Vermont involving a bump stock? When was the last time there was a mass shooting in Vermont involving expanded magazines, high-capacity magazines, which I guess is anything more than 10 or 12 bullets? I'm not sure which, because certain states use both, and I'm not exactly sure why. When's the last time, actually, come to think of it, that there was a mass shooting in Vermont at all? The few shootings that occur in this state, you're more likely to accidentally get hit by a hunter who's wandering around the woods and had one too many Bud Lights than you are to be deliberately inflicted with a gunshot wound. If you do get shot in the state, chances are it was related, like a drug deal, domestic violence dispute, and it involves a handgun. As far as I know, scratching my head here, I can't remember when was the last time we even had an incident where multiple people were shot with a long gun, the kind of weapon that this is actually meant to affect. I don't think there actually has been such a shooting in this state. If there has, it's been a very, very long time. You see, Vermont's violent crime rate is extremely low. One of the reasons it's probably so low is we were literally the only state for a while with constitutional carry. So, if you're a criminal, you're probably not going to operate in Vermont. You probably go over into New York or down into Massachusetts to conduct property crime or whatever. Don't want to do it here where everyone's armed to the teeth. It'd be crazy. You're like, oh yeah, I'm a gang member, I've got a handgun, but if I break into someone's house, they probably do have an assault rifle, so-called. They probably, at the very least, they probably have a shotgun. I might not survive the encounter. I'd rather go over to New York where they've already got draconian anti-Second Amendment laws and go bother them. I'd rather, even New Hampshire, which is like, Libertarian 101 state. I'd rather go, even they're less armed than those crazy Vermont hippies. One of the things that set our state apart, one of the things that's made it so wonderful, is that we can have, the Second Amendment actually being practiced as it's meant to be practiced, along with elements within our state constitution along similar lines, by the way, that they screw their attempt here anyway in court. We've had that, but we also have like a totally liberal society, one of the bluest states, filled with hippies, but it's like environmental hippiedom. It's not anti-gun, Bloomberg-style New York corporate machine neoliberalism. It's like rural liberalism. It's literally like hippies and stuff. That remnant hippie population, I think, that had gravitated here to be, away from the man, I think understood at the very least one thing that they continued to understand in their hippiedom as it moves into yuppiedom was that the government being trusted with disarming people probably wasn't a great idea. Because the same government that gave people guns and sent them over to Southeast Asia to go get, killed or hit by a cloud of Agent Orange or whatever was telling people here that they shouldn't be able to own even the most topical of weapons. Oh, you shouldn't. It's bad to own firearms. We've gotten to the point where the attempt now, the propaganda attempt, is to cast people who own firearms off as rubish, as unintelligent, or as violent. That's been a continuing thing, but also unintelligent or as backwards or as uncool. They're older. Yeah, we young people don't need guns or whatever. I think you'll find that argument falls flat in many parts of Vermont that are still largely rural, in which there's still a hunting tradition, but maybe, okay, you can try it. The thing is, though, I am of the mind that if something is not broken, it should not be fixed. Other states can have gun crime problems, especially in inner city areas, because most gun crime in this country that isn't related to an accidental shooting or a suicide or a shooting that isn't justified, most of the rest involves a handgun and a drug deal gone wrong or a drive-by. It involves gang violence. So where are the Crips and the Bloods or that, I can't remember the name of that gang that Trump talks about all the time. Where are they in Vermont? They don't exist here. Where's the Russian mafia doing hits on people? I don't see them. There's like no gang violence in Vermont. Another part is, of course, weed is now legal, has been for a while, decriminalized. It probably cuts into the profits of someone who's actually in a gang. There's no reason to traffic it. A lot of it's just going to be homegrown in some hippie's cornfield anyway. So who fucking cares? Here's the thing that I would say. I think that this will increase the gun crime and violent crime rates in Vermont and the property crime rate. Over the next few years, you look at the statistics. and see if it doesn't at least slightly increase them. I'm willing to bet anything that it will, and it'll be an increase that's not commensurate with any subsequent increase in the rate federally. That is, it'll outstrip the average nationwide. You look at other states that are passing gun laws like this, and I think they'll fall into the same boat. Now, as for the idea of banning people under 21 from owning a gun, how I wish I was 20 right now so I could go over to Dick's Sporting Goods, say, oh, I want to buy a rifle. Oh, well, you can't. Oh, I'm going to sue you and I'm going to sue the state. It's going to be great because you're going to have to pay through the nose because you violated my constitutional rights. The only way that the age limit increase would be constitutional is if you used a constitutional amendment to raise the voting age to 21. You do realize that, right? To increase the age of citizenship, people take the oath at 21 instead of 18. Good luck getting the U.S. military to sign off on that. Good luck getting anybody to support it. Good luck getting 19 and 20-year-olds to vote for removing their own right to vote. Good luck maintaining the constitutional amendment at all when a class of people that is among the most liberal wouldn't be voting in the next election. Oh, it would shove everything far to the right. Then the right would then gobble up the new youth and say, oh yeah, we'll restore your rights. And just remember who, restored this after the evil leftists took it away and wanted you to be disarmed. So you're telling me in the state of Vermont now, a person who owns a home, they own a home, they're like 20 or something. No, they can't actually defend themselves effectively. They can't purchase a firearm. Now, are they allowed to own one? Like if they've already purchased it, are they grandfathered in which case, how does this affect anything? It doesn't make any sense. As for mental illness background checks, the definition of what constitutes mentally ill is different from under the Vermont Constitution. Did you know this? Lunacy and mental illness are presumably not the same. Lunatics in the state of Vermont can't vote, can't own a gun, can't do anything. But they've got to be a lunatic. So what definition are you going to use? Is someone with mild depression, do they fall under the lunatic category? Mental illness. So if a person has seen a psychiatrist, is on pills, they can't own a gun. So you're telling me that, oh yeah, a quarter of the U.S. population needs to be disarmed. I don't think that's going to fly in a court. I think they'll shoot it down. And it was funny that one of the courts was weighing, I think it was the Ninth Circuit, actually, which is the funny part. Like, oh yeah, most of the things that they're asking for are capable of taking place because they conform to the Second Amendment. It's not up to you to determine. I think SCOTUS would have to solve that problem. Keep in mind, by the way, the Supreme Court right now leans slightly conservative on gun rights. Is probably in the next year or two going to lean further right because Ginsburg's probably not going to be above ground. Trump will probably get one, possibly two more Supreme Court justices. And talking about Russia or how he's illegitimate or you don't like him or he's bigoted isn't going to solve the problem for you. He's still legally entitled to appoint them, and he will. He'll get his appointments. They're not going to sit there. They're not going to, if Ginsburg keels over, they're going to want her replaced right quick. They're not going to want a Supreme Court minus a justice that still leans to the right. Trust me on that one. The Democrats will beg Trump to choose someone who's just center-left to replace someone who is the furthest left member of the court. They will be begging before long for him to do that. Your gun control option, the Vermont gun grab here, for instance, bans high-capacity magazines. Again, a totally arbitrary determinant. There is no fundamental difference between the deadliness of a firearm with a magazine that holds 10 bullets and one that holds 30. Unless the person is engaged in a mass shooting, in which case they're probably not listening to the law. They can get that magazine. They can go over to New Hampshire and buy one. Okay, it's illegal. Their intent is to break the law. This will not stop a mass shooting. Thankfully, here in the state of Vermont, as far as I know, again, there haven't been any shootings like that. I think deadly shootings in the state of Vermont are extremely uncommon, but this is going to increase property crime because it'll make homeowners slightly less effective at defending themselves. See, they'll follow the law. They're not going to go out of their way. They're not going to bother with the bump stock, which, by the way, is completely fucking useless. By the way, can I just tell you something that a lot of the anti-gun crowd don't seem to understand? A bump stock is just one of a number of enhancements to the weapon that functions in basically the same manner, turning a semi-automatic weapon into a very high rate of fire weapon. It's still technically semi-auto, but it fires a lot faster, admittedly. By the way, it severely is going to reduce your accuracy. Most people, unless you've trained with it to a substantial degree, trust me, that gun's going to fly right up, probably hit you in the head, or so you might end up hurting yourself instead of other people, which would probably be good. Yeah, we should force mass shooters to use bump stocks so hopefully they drop the gun. So hopefully they kill themselves instead. I think that'd be great. It's called a Gatling crank, and there are a number of other things you can attach to them as well. It's basically the same concept, and nobody's banning it. Okay. Well, then what's the friggin' point? It's like Vermont just dropped its suppressor ban, which, by the way, got rid of the last meaningful piece of anti-weapon legislation in the whole state. The only thing left was, hey, a switchblade can only be so long, like a knife with a spring in it to sort of pop out, had to be under, like, I think a 3-inch blade or a 2.5-inch blade, which is like, why would you want it longer? It wouldn't be very sturdy. But that was the only meaningful piece of legislation left that was geared towards denigrating the second. And then they come in less than a year later with this bullshit. Yeah, okay. So basically, there's a reason people voted for our esteemed governor, who says that he'll sign this bullshit when it goes back to the Senate again. They have to put it through the House a second time. In Vermont, that's the law. It goes to the House, the Senate, the House, the Senate. It's not like in some states where it just goes through once. Phil Scott was elected in part because, in a fairly tight race, by the way, because people who would have voted Democrat, trust me, on fiscal issues, they didn't like Sue Minter because she was a pawn of Bloomberg. She wanted to introduce sweeping gun legislation. Oddly enough, very similar to the gun legislation now being passed by Phil Scott, who, again, was voted for by people who were against that. Let's see if Phil Scott is capable of surviving his primary challenge, which I guarantee will come. Good. I hope he gets kicked out as the Republican candidate. I know at this point, I wouldn't vote for Phil Scott. I would stand for governor and vote for myself before I would vote for Phil Scott at this point. And probably win, because it's not like he'd be able to stand against me on a debate stage. I think that'd be hilarious. It'd be great. And then people would say, well, he was a spoiler. He threw it to the Democrats. Yeah, maybe. Who cares? Phil Scott is a Democrat, except he dragged his heels on legalizing pot. I would have gone further and I would have said, okay, I'm signing the legalization. I think it should be even more libertarian. I don't care if people grow 10 plants before they get a license. Who cares? Just make sure your kids aren't smoking it. I don't really care. Don't drive under the influence. Don't wander out so stoned that you slobber all over yourself. It's like public indecency or something. And don't give it to people who are under 18. Okay, problem solved. Yeah, I wouldn't even bother taxing the shit unless a person wanted to grow more than a few plants. In which case, okay, well, yeah, we're going to tax you per plant, and the state will, pay for part of our bloated education budget or something. But it's crazy. What we need, actually, in the state of Vermont, we're the weird state, so we're the only ones that can probably do this. We need to pass a law making it illegal for Congress in the state to pass any additional laws in the immediate wake of an emotional event. That is, they should have to have a 1-month waiting period before they can consider legislation of this type. Because what they're doing is jumping the gun. They're taking an emotional national issue that doesn't really apply to the state at all. A state where there's almost nothing in the way of weapon disarmament or confiscation at all, and yet our violent crime rate is rock bottom. They're taking a national conversation over a handful of lunatics that were fucked over by the mental health system, and over crime that happens in a few dozen major metro areas across the country, and extrapolating that to our state. Well, that makes absolutely no sense at all. Vermont is not New York City. Vermont is not Detroit. It's not Los Angeles. There is a difference between the style of life with people who live in rural situations and small-town America and people who live in metro areas. Let localities decide. States should not be involved. There's no homogeneity across the United States. There's not even really homogeneity between Burlington's metro area and where I am. There's no similarity in the style of life, in what does or does not make sense in regards to whatever legislation you would or would not pass. It doesn't even make sense. It's not going to stop a single crime. I can guarantee you that it won't. And I think it's a bad idea. I think, yeah, absolutely. We need to pass a waiting period on legislation based on national or state level tragedy. Whenever a tragic event occurs, and legislatures come forward offering a magical bullet solution to it, it's never a solution. It never works. We've tried gun control since the 1870s in this country. Only in the last couple decades, in the wake of a lot of it basically going the way of the dinosaur. Oh, McDonald versus Chicago, DC versus Heller, the assault rifle ban expiring. Oh, now there's more guns in more hands. A lot of the gun control is gone, and yet the violent crime rate in the country has dropped like a rock. How can the two be reconciled? There's a reason why Vermont's so safe. Part of that is the fact that we have a gun culture in the state of Vermont. Yeah, Vermont's filled with homosexuals. I would much rather live in that situation than in a place where everyone's disarmed and the violent crime rate's sky high. I would much rather live around... Yeah, I don't care if someone's concealed or open carrying around me. It doesn't intimidate me. I can do the same thing. I'm a free citizen. I don't have to ask anyone's fucking permission. Constitutional carry. So, yeah, the state is making a huge mistake. I stand against it. Our ballless senators won't stand in the way, and our rhino governor won't stand in the way. So he needs to be replaced as quickly as possible with someone who will do the job that they were hired to do and maintain stability and safety within the state of Vermont. That's about all. Peace out.